Am I looking for a red?
Give me 2 seconds.
It's still pre-live, Chair.
Pete, do a countdown.
Okay, it's live now.
Thank you.
I can't see a red box anywhere, but
You are. You're live.
Okay, I'm live. Okay, good evening and Happy New Year to you all. My name is Councillor Richard Eason, and I'm chairing this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. As our chair is Councillor Surinder Purwell is only able to join via audio telephone due to technical issues, and our vice chair is absent. It is now just after 5 o'clock, and I would like to welcome you to the third virtual meeting of Hounslow's Audit and Governance Committee. I would like to welcome the members of the committee who are sitting this evening, as well as council officers who will be assisting members throughout the meeting. In addition, I would like to welcome members of the public who are watching this meeting at home. As you may, all may know, until recently, virtual meetings for council business were not legal, but as a result of the coronavirus pandemic and the quarantine arrangements required by government, the law has changed to let local authorities meet in a virtual way to make decisions. Therefore, this meeting is taking place using the recently introduced government regulations. The way this meeting will work will be that as chair, I will be running the meeting and inviting people to speak. As it is very easy for people to speak over each other in meetings like this, I will ask each member or officer to speak in turn at the appropriate stage, and everyone will have a chance to speak. This will mean that there should normally be no need for people to interrupt or to ask to speak. However, if a member does have an urgent reason to interject, for example, a point of order, please do so by turning on your microphone and telling me that you wish to interject. The exception to this will be the committee or finance officers who may turn on their microphone to alert me to any procedural or finance issue that needs addressing, although I would expect this to be a rare occurrence. In addition, we have producers of the meeting from our ICT department who may also contact me if necessary, but I think this, I hope this will be unlikely with if all goes well, although with me chairing for the first time, I can't guarantee that. The etiquette for members of the committee and for officers who are expecting to speak will be to mute your microphones until you are asked to speak. This means that only one person will be speaking at a time, and there will be no background noise, making it easier for us all to follow the meeting and also for those watching at home. I would also ask members always to say who they are when they make a contribution and to speak slowly and clearly for the same reason. The members of the Audit and Governance Committee with us here this evening will be making the decisions. Officers of the Council will provide assistance and advice as required, but the final decisions will be made by members. Okay, introductions. I would like to introduce each member, each of the members here tonight, one by one. I will start. My name is Councillor Richard Eason. I'm a member of this committee, and I'm chairing due to the technical issues this evening. I am also a ward councillor for the Osterley and Spring Grove ward. Now, if I introduce the other members in turn, I believe Councillor Lal is not with us this evening, so Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Amrit Mann, Councillor for Heston East. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Purwell.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Surinder for Heston Central. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Simra, I don't believe is with us, so Councillor Todd.
Yeah, Councillor Simra. I can see his picture, Richard.
Oh, right. So, sorry, Councillor Simra.
You just need to unmute, Councillor Sumra. You're on mute.
You're still muted.
As you've heard, more than 2 million doses of vaccine have now been given out. And today, as you've heard from several states, the detailed strategy will be covered.
Hello, Councillor Sumra, you're muted. You need to unmute.
As Sir Simon Stevens, Chief Executive of NHS England, said earlier today, we're in a sprint from now to February.
Chair, Councillor Sumra could be seen on the live feed, and members can see him. Maybe best to move on at this moment.
Yes, okay. So Councillor Sumra is a representative for Hounslow West Ward and a member of this and vice chair of this committee. So we'll move on to Councillor Todd.
Following the hand, space and space advice, these vaccines are our best line of defence that we have as we continue this battle against coronavirus. And as the Secretary of State said, the public should be in no doubt that this fight is tougher than it has ever been. Since Christmas Day, there
Seem to have some background noise.
with COVID-19. And less than a fortnight into 2021, the number of people in hospital with COVID has already gone up by a third, a rise of around 8,000.
So is any
Seeing stubbornly high levels of infection.
Chair, somebody's watching the news, so
Turn it down, Ruth.
we need to find out who it is.
yeah. Right. Councillor Todd, did you manage to introduce yourself?
I didn't know, but I am now Councillor John Todd of Homefield Ward, member of the Audit Committee and a wife watching television, and I've tasked her to turn it down, sorry.
Right, thank you. Right, we also have the officers who will be presenting reports present tonight, including Clive Parfuman, Rupa Ragwani, Kali Tumba. I believe we have apologies from Laura Watson. We have Mike Pinder, and we also have Lucy Nutley and perhaps a colleague from our external auditors, Mazars. In addition to the officers above, we also have Chaspal Sandhu and Kay Duffy present from committee services. We also have officers acting in a producing role for the technical side of the meeting, but as they're not expected to be involved in the discussion, I will thank them for their help, but not introduce them by name. Can everyone keep their microphones muted when they're not speaking? Members of the public are reminded that the agenda and all the reports being considered by the committee tonight can be found on the council website under the Audit and Governance Committee meetings page. So if you want to see them, that is where to look.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Hello,
you.
Councillor Sumra, can you hear me? Hi.
Okay, hi. Hi, can I?
Right. So I also want to make sure that all members have seen the agenda and reports. So councillors, please speak now if you have not had them.
Hello.
Okay.
We've all had them, Richard. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I would like to remind members of the need to hear all of the presentation for each report we're considering tonight. This means that you should listen to the whole debate. This is a legal requirement, and I will be asking you to confirm you have heard the whole debate before you vote on any matter this evening. If you find you have technical problems and need to log out of the meeting and come back in again, please let me know immediately, ideally beforehand, but if not, afterwards by turning on your microphone. This would be a permitted interruption. We can then decide how far we need to recap if that is necessary, or if the member needs to not vote on that item. Thank you. We'll now move on to the first item. Apologies, declarations of interest and other communications. Yeah. Do we have apologies from any of the members of the committee? That would be
Councillor Lau.
right. Thank you, Councillor Mann. Apologies from Councillor Mao. We have 5 present, so that is the quorum of 3, exceeds the quorum of 3, so the meeting can proceed. Next question is, are there any declarations of interest or other communications from councillors? I'll take that silence as no. Okay. Next, we move on to item number 2, minutes and matters arising from the last meeting of the committee held on the 28th of September. These are on pages 3 to 5 of the agenda pack. I intend to do both corrections for accuracy and any matters arising together. May I ask members if they have any corrections that they wish to propose? Speak now if you wish to do so. Right, so no, yeah,
No corrections, Chair.
no corrections.
That's agreed.
No matters arising.
No matters arising. Unless John or some of the other colleagues may have something. No. Otherwise, I would say it's agreed, Chair.
So, yeah. May I? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's agreed. Well, I would. Well, either I or Councillor Purwell would sign a physical copy of the minutes, but this is currently impractical. We'll ask the committee officer to ensure that a paper copy is signed either by post or at Hounslow House. In the meantime, the minutes will formally record that we have agreed the minutes as a correct record of the last meeting. Okay, moving on to item number 3. Which is the review of polling districts and polling places in the London Borough of Hounslow and the new electoral ward arrangements. I believe that Cully Tumba, our Head of Electoral Services, is here to present that item. So if I hand over.
Good afternoon, everyone. Members are probably aware that the Hounslow Electoral Changes Order received royal assent in October last year. This means that new warding arrangements will come into force at the next local elections in May 2022. So the next steps in this process is to review the polling districts and polling places. Although this is something that's done every 5 years, with the last compulsory review done only last year. But because of the current polling districts, they don't sit with the new wards, it's essential a review is carried out now and not wait until the next compulsory review, which is 2024. To ensure members' involvement and support officers in this project, it's proposed to set up an informal electoral review panel that will make recommendations to this committee. Attached to the report are suggested polling districts and polling place scenarios that can be used used by the review panel as a basis for creating draft proposals. I'm open to any questions that members may have. That's about it in what's in the report.
Okay, thank you for that. We now move to the second part of the process, which is for members to ask any questions or make comments about the report. I'll do this. We will do this by calling each of the members of the committee in turn, starting with Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. There are no questions as such. It's just that on some of the plans on this report, they don't actually show the entire area. So sometimes, the information is somewhat scant. But I understand the report because this is something that's gone through the entire council process for it to be brought back here through after the government's had a look at it. So in more or less essence, I'm in agreement with what is in front of us. I don't particularly have any questions at this moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Purwell. Councillor Purwell, are you still on the call? On the telephone? We can't hear you.
Councillor Purwell, if you're muted, you may need to press *6 to unmute yourself.
Okay, we'll come back to you if you if you make yourself known. Next, I'll turn to Councillor Sumra.
No comments. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Councillor Sumra. That's great. So you've no comments on that.
Thank you.
Councillor Todd.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've read the report at Pepro Chiswick and I'm very happy with the suggested recommendations.
Okay. Lastly, yeah, myself, I've read the report, found that very interesting, and the work that's gone into the polling district appendices, I think, is very strong. So I believe the report talks about member involvement to produce something for consultation. It seems as though most of the work has already been done on that. It also talks about establishing a electoral review panel to support this process. And before we sort of adopt the recommendations, I wanted to ask whether there are any members of this Audit and Governance Committee who wish to be on that electoral review panel. I'm getting silence there. I would like to be on that panel myself, so I will flag up that desire. And I'm just looking now at what we've. Yeah, so I think.
Chair,
so,
can I say something?
We've got your. Go ahead, Councillor Purwell.
Yeah, I tried to unmute, I couldn't, but now I'm unmuted. I will support you becoming a member. And the only question I had was that if there's a by-election, would the older boundaries apply or new boundaries?
The current boundaries apply. So the new boundaries come into effect at a full local election, which is May 2022.
Thank you.
And perhaps a related question is where there are proposed changes of polling station, and I note in my ward, an Ostley Spring Grove ward, Isleworth and Science School comes off the list, and I think it's St Mary's Church is proposed. Would simple changes of polling stations be proposed for 2021 elections, or would they only come in 2022?
So this report only focuses on the 2022 election.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, if there's no further questions, we have 3 recommendations in the report. Can we have someone to?
Yeah, Chair,
formally-
I formally move that we adopt the three
Recommendations.
recommendations. Okay.
Yes, I second that.
Okay, that's moved, seconded. Yeah, may I remind members that they should only vote if they've heard all the debate on this report. I will now go along the members of the committee one by one to ask you to confirm you have heard everything, and to vote either for or against the proposal, or to abstain. I'll now invite one by one. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Amrit Mann. I've heard the debate, been present throughout, and I vote for the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Purwell.
Hello, Surinder Purwell here, and I heard the debate and I support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Sumra.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I support the recommendation. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Todd.
Councillor John Todd, I support the recommendation.
Thank you. And finally, myself, Councillor Richard Eason. I've been here all the time, listened to it all, and I support the recommendation. So that is carried. Thank you, everybody, for that's agenda item 3. Now we move on to agenda item 4, which is Treasury Management Strategy, Investment Strategy, and Minimum Revenue Provision Policy for 21-22. Usually Lorelei would present this. I understand that Clive is going to be presenting that, if that's correct, or if
yes,
not, whoever is. Yeah, thank you, Clive.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, members. This is the proposed Treasury Management Strategy for 21-22, which starts on page 33 of your packs. It's in the usual format that you'll be used to seeing over previous years, and like previous years, it's not a report that we are seeking your approval for. We are seeking feedback as the report takes its journey onto Cabinet in February and ultimately Borough Council later on in February. The report is split into 4 main sections. Firstly, it is the Treasury Management Strategy itself. The Appendix A then moves into the Annual Investment Strategy. Then we make the statutory statement on minimum revenue provision. And then lastly, there's the prudential and treasury indicators that we include every year. The report doesn't present any material changes from what you've been comfortable with in previous years. However, as we've reported to Borough Council over the course of the year, our cash flow is getting tighter over the course of time, and as a consequence of that, we have less investment surplus cash available for investment. Also over the course of the year, as the council's capital ambitions and that of Lambton 360 come to fruition, we expect to be borrowing more over the course of the coming year, but that's not anything that worries us. Investing in capital to bring down our revenue costs is absolutely an appropriate way forward. The report will change slightly before when you see it again at Borough Council in February. That is because we're yet to receive the final proposals from Lambton and we need to work through those. On the January Cabinet agenda are the commissioning principles for Lambton, and Lambton will of course respond to that prior to our budget setting in February. But the overall tone and approach, I hope, will not change fundamentally, but obviously we'll take on board any comments members have this evening. Lorelei sends her apologies. She's a little bit unwell at the moment, otherwise she would usually be here. I expect she'll be back to present this element to Cabinet in February. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Clive. So we'll go down the list again. Firstly, Councillor Mann, any questions, comments, etc.?
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief one. Clive, we talk about the economic background in section 4.9, page 38. Now, the interest rates stated there and the growth that is likely to come off as a result of COVID. Now, given that our standing UK economy in the world, are we likely to see any changes to the bank base rate, which would then have a knock-on effect onto our rate, which would then have an effect onto the amount of money that we're able to free up to invest? At the moment, you're saying it's very little, but then that means if there's a change in bank base rate upwards, there's likely to be less than what we currently have. So what is the impact of COVID on the interest rates and on our investment strategy going forward? Thank you, Chair.
If you're happy to take that now, paragraph 4.10 on the next page, Councillor Mann outlines our Treasury advisors' forecasts around interest rate going forward. You'll see that they expect things to be fairly static going forward. So that is the basis on which we have planned. But I think what I would say, working from experience over recent years, is that things do change very quickly. Obviously, we've got a lot of uncertainty economically at the moment related to COVID. We've got the uncertainty that Brexit brings as well. And for those of us that were around in 2008, working in these kind of sort of environments when the world did change very quickly with the bank crash, a company called Capital Economics were laughed at several forums by suggesting that interest rates would fall to below 1% at a time when they were just over 5.5%. And within 18 months they had. So that is what our Treasury advisors are projecting at the moment. That's benchmarked against what other projections are out there in the sector as well. And whilst that is the basis on which we're planning, given the uncertainty at the moment, I think it's difficult to give too much of a cast iron guarantee that those are the ones that will come through in practice.
Thank you.
Sure. So does that mean that, Clive, that we made any investments into this company, Capital Finance or whatever it was?
No, we haven't. But they're still live and kicking and doing a roaring trade out there. But yeah, very uncertain environment at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Purwell.
No, the question I wanted to ask you have already been asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sumra.
No question, because what happened already fully explained. So I'm happy.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Todd.
Yes, Clive, page 52. Page 52. Paragraphs. The multi-asset income fund.
Yep.
Do you think it appropriate to show the market value of that?
We can do. Treasury management dealing with hundreds of £1 million every year. I guess we try and find the balance between producing enough detail to give members assurance without overcomplicating reports to an unnecessary extent, but quite happy to share the market value of the fund as it stands at the moment.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Was that your only question on the
yes.
on the report, Councillor Todd? Okay. Thank you. And I have no questions or comments. It's the as Clive said, it follows this pattern established over the last few years. And if I'm reading the recommendations section correctly, this is just for noting. We don't need to go through the
correct.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah. Noted,
okay.
Chair. Noted.
Noted.
Yes, noted.
Thank you. We now move on to item 5, statement of accounts update, which is where I think we're going to spend quite a bit of time. So we're, I think that we're going to have an initial presentation from Rupa and then representatives from Mazars, and then some Q&A. So can we
thank you, Chair.
kick off? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and evening members. So there is a short covering report in the pack around about page 65, 66, which basically just gives a quite high level update on where we're at with the 2019-20 audits. Just to remind members that the deadlines for both the preparation of the statement of accounts and auditing deadlines were kind of extended this year because of the pandemic. At this stage, the audit work is still ongoing and underway, but it's in its final stages of the audit process, so in the review stages. We've got Mazars on the call today, so they will provide a more detailed update as to where they're at in the audit process on the 1920 statement of accounts. Also reflected within that report and in Appendix A on round about page 66, I think it is the FRC report. So you'll remember that there was an FRC review on public sector audits last year. So the FRC report's attached in Appendix A, and in Appendix B to the report is Mazars' response to some of the findings from FRC. I'm happy to take questions on the audit itself, but I thought it might be probably better for Lucy from Mazars to give you a more kind of up-to-date picture on the audit for the 1920 audit as it currently stands, and then maybe take questions afterwards. Is that okay, Chair?
Yeah, that's ideal, I think. Lucy, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Our work is ongoing. As a response.
So Lucy, first of all, could you introduce yourself for the benefit of the people who are watching at home?
Apologies, Chair. My name is Lucy Nutley and I'm the engagement lead for the external audit of the Council and working for Mazars. So the audit of the 1920 financial statement continues. As we have the FRC report on slightly later in this agenda. One of the key actions we took following the FRC review was to instigate a process of hot review, whereby an independent member of the technical team reviews the audit file and all the significant risk areas. It was a really thorough review, a technical review of all the work that's been done. And this review has highlighted areas where we don't at this point have sufficient evidence around some property valuations. So we're working with the Council and the external valuer to get the evidence that we need to support these valuations. As I said, our work is ongoing and it is a priority to complete this work as soon as possible, but we do need to resolve these issues around building valuation before we can conclude the audit. Work on IT general controls was identified as not being properly complete, and this is again being completed as a matter of priority. I appreciate this delay is frustrating for members and officers, and I would like to assure you that we are working as quickly and as hard as we can to get all the information that we require in order for us to complete the audit and sign off the file, and we will do this as soon as we can.
Okay, just before we go around the room on this one, could you just clarify for us what the original extended deadline for the accounts was, and what your current estimate is of the for the completion of this audit for the year to March 2020?
Yeah, so the as Rupa mentioned, the deadline was extended to the 30th of November 2020. At this point, we are still speaking to the valuer, and I think depending on what information we can get from the valuer, that will determine how long we are going to take. We are doing it as quickly as we possibly can, but I wouldn't like to say how long we will be, but it will be as soon as we can.
And just in terms of the properties that you're needing to get more detailed valuations, Could you just describe what those properties are and whether or not it is likely that we would be divesting those in the short to medium term?
One of the properties is Hounslow House, so I shouldn't imagine that the council is planning to divest of Hounslow House in the near future. That's the biggest one that we're dealing with. I can't remember off the top of my head the other ones, but certainly Hounslow House is one of the ones that we are questioning at the moment.
Okay. Thank you. Now, if we go around the room, Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. Just another quick one. Lucy, following on from the Chair's questioning into the property valuations, is that because of the present situation with COVID? And if so, is there a devaluation of our assets?
No, we haven't identified a devaluation of assets as an impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. What valuers have done is to apply a material valuation uncertainty to valuations of land and buildings, basically saying that you might not place as much weight on that value as you would normally, because at the point they valued in the 31st of March, there was such an amount of uncertainty in the world. We've just gone into the first lockdown, which seems like a very long time ago now. The issue we have is around the gross internal area, so the floor space of Hounslow House, and how the valuer has got to the valuation and the floor area they've used to get that valuation. Sorry, that's really muddled. So to get to the valuation of Hounslow House, the valuer has used the gross floor area times by multiplier. And what we're struggling at the moment to see is to understand how the valuer has got to that gross internal area. And that's what we're working with the valuer and the council on, if that's helpful.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just come back. I mean, that's great in terms of process, but on a practical basis, and I know from big lenders to these large developers who are struggling now, there is what they call a COVID factor, right? That's being applied for devaluing the asset. I was wondering whether there was something very similar, because I know that you talk about uncertainty. It could be the uncertainty of COVID, whatever. But was there a particular a factor? Because out in the real world, what they're using is about a factor of 20% devaluation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, it's a good question. I think your valuations were done as at 31st of March 2020, when, as I say, we just got into that first lockdown, and I think the fall in values that you're referring to would probably be much later in the year, when the impact of COVID has been more felt in the economy, and also the assets that we're looking at. Certainly Hounslow House is not an asset held for sale. That is done on depreciated replacement cost because it's a specialist asset, so it's a slightly different way of valuing it. But I think any fall in value would be recorded next year if that impact is still being felt at March 2021. I wouldn't have expected to see it at March 2020.
No further questions, Councillor Mann? Okay. Right, Councillor Purwell.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Obviously, the days for the reports have come and gone, not one, but more than one. And we don't really know at this stage when the accounts are going to be signed. And it's putting it in a very bad light. Can Lucy give any specific date when the accounts will be ready?
I think, Councillor Powell, I don't want to give another date and not meet it. I think I really need to understand where we've got to with the valuer, and if additional work or additional time needs to be spent around the issue I've described for Hounslow House and for a few other assets. So I would really rather not be drawn on a date, but to assure you that we are working as quickly as we possibly can to complete this.
Okay.
Okay. Have you got further questions, Councillor Perwell?
No, not really. What can you say? I'm quite disappointed, really.
Do you want to make any comments about the FRC report, or would you like to do another round after?
No, I don't want to make any comment because obviously accounts are very important. They have their requirement to be filed by a certain date. The dates have come and gone, and obviously doesn't put us in a very good light.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Sumra.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Mr. Poriwal already said what I want to say, because it doesn't sound good, it doesn't look good. If we can't even, produce the accounts on time, what's the point by paying that amount of money?
Okay. I think that was a rhetorical question, so we won't ask Lucy to comment on that. I think, but I would sort of note that in terms of producing the accounts, and Rupert might want to come in if I got this wrong. It's our draft accounts were produced and published in June or July, if I remember correctly. So the delay is about the auditing of the accounts, not our own team's production of them.
I guess I'm aware of that. Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Easton, it was early July, but just remind members that actually we would normally have produced the accounts for the end of May under the old deadlines, and there was a relaxation of the preparation of the accounts deadline as well as the audit deadline, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Todd.
Yeah, good evening, Lucy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good, all right. You look very relaxed in that huge office. If I'm trying to put your work in context of your mind, as I understand it, you have a 5-year contract with us. This is the second year of the contract, and the second year you've been out of date with your accounts. Why is this a repeat performance?
I think this year has been a very difficult year, Councillor Todd. We've been remote auditing. Things have taken longer. We've had to do additional work around valuations for the impact of COVID. It's sad that it is a repeat performance, and to note that other firms are struggling too, and that's not doing down kind of the service you've received. I'm actually going to ask if you wouldn't mind, Chair, if I could bring in Karen Murray, who is the head of Audit Government for Mazar. She might be able to give you a better picture of kind of our national picture.
Please.
Well, I'm very keen to stick locally because, if you don't mind, good evening to you. I've forgotten your name. I've examined, you do 3 other audits, Lucy, Hackney and Harrow. And Harrow seems to be on time. They have a completion document, and Hackney's in the same position as us. But what the frustration I have is this, amongst others, is simply that this committee have a mandate from the council to monitor and effect governance on the accounts. And neither the report of the officer tonight or your one, well, there was no report, it was a verbal update. We haven't got a clue. If we stop this meeting now, we haven't got a clue when we'd see your audit papers. Now that is utterly bizarre. And so can I ask you to explain that point first?
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Would either Lucy or Karen like to respond
It's an open-ended
to that?
question. I'm just trying to get a feel on this. We've got no feedback at all as to when we'll ever see these accounts audited. That's a statement of fact.
I think in terms of the other London boroughs that you mentioned, Councillor Todd, none of them have been signed off. They are all they are all at a very similar point that we are in the final stages of review.
Can I be more specific, if you wouldn't mind? For the first time tonight, you say you're still hanging around on property. I think we raised property at the last meeting. But if you were waiting solely for property, why did you ask on the 23rd of December this year for basic ICT and HR data?
Yeah,
a month after the agreed previous date.
Yeah, as part of the finalising of the review process, we identified that IT general controls work that had to be done had not been properly completed, which is why we then asked for that information later on in the year, because I do need to have that information on file before I can complete the audit. And that had been an oversight, that it hadn't been done and it hadn't been picked up that it hadn't been done.
Well, can I ask how it was picked up? Was it an external review of your work or your supervision?
I can't honestly. I think it was the hot reviewer that picked it. I can't honestly remember at this point. I think it was the hot reviewer picked up that what we had on file wasn't fully complete.
Okay. If I look at page 17 of the FRC report, talking about your firm, it says, following its poor results over the past 5 years, the firm needs to commit to an action plan for local audit quality improvement. Key areas include the audit of property valuations. And elsewhere in the report, it gives examples of good practice where firms like yours seek specialist advice to challenge our valuer. Would you like to comment on that aspect?
Yeah. Is it possible for me to come in?
Of course it is. Of course it is, yes. Sorry.
Yeah. So my name is Karen Murray. I'm the partner that leads nationally for the firm on public sector external audit, as Lucy mentioned. And I think it's probably useful if I give a little bit more context around where Mazars is and what we're trying to achieve here. So a number of the issues that FRC raised in their report are issues that have been raised with a lot of audit firms over a very few years now, in relation to particularly public sector work around valuation of property, plant and equipment. Some of the issues arise simply because it is so complex in the public sector. So you've got such very different sorts of properties that you're trying to get a valuation for. So for example, how to value a council house is very different from how to value a school or a leisure centre, a library, or indeed the council's office block there at Hounslow House. So there are some particular, and then we'll also hold investment properties which are valued on a different basis and which are very complex. There are valuation bases that exist in the public sector that don't exist in the private sector, not mirrored in a set of company accounts in terms of how to value things. It is true that FRC's expectations about the work that audit firms will do across the board, whether that's commercial or in the public sector, needs to increase and improve in respect of property valuations, and that's in response to problems that they've found from their inspection work that they've done, predominantly private sector, has to be said, but across the board. And therefore we have radically changed over the last couple of years the way in which we approach our audit of property, plant and equipment. And I think if I was sitting where your valuer is sitting now, I would be saying the audit team are asking me questions that they've never asked before. They're going to a far more detail, if you like, around things like, for example, where have you got this floor area from? So last year we might have accepted that the valuer had, as Lucy said, this is the floor area, and multiply it by this price per metre or whatever unit of measurement they've used, and knock off this much for dilapidation as a percentage, and knock off this much for whatever other factor they're considering, and I add on this for professional fees, and I come to an answer. But actually what we're doing now is we're going back and saying, well, where has that floor area come from? Prove to us as a starting point that the floor area is correct. Then you've applied a factor for dilapidations. Where have you got that factor from? How does it compare with other things? Why is that the right factor to use? Whereas in the past, we have probably taken as a given, if you like, that the professional valuer has advised on that, and therefore it's right that we can just accept it. So we're challenging much more detail really around how the valuers arrived at where they are. I think it's fair to say in a number of cases, not necessarily specific to you in Hounslow, but in a number of cases, valuers have found that level of challenge and query difficult to deal with, because they haven't necessarily kept a record of some of those things that are in their professional judgment and are very much their bread and butter. So we have asked your valuer where they've got the floor area from that they've used, and we are waiting for somebody to demonstrate to us that the floor area that the valuer has applied is the right floor area. It may be officers in the council, before those numbers from the valuation were dropped into your account, have confirmed that they were happy with the floor area and the various other bits of detail that are used in evaluation, but we haven't yet been able to see that and satisfy ourselves that those bits of information all go together to build up a complete picture. What we have done during the course of the year, and in direct response to the FRC, is to increase the depth and granularity of the work that we're doing.
Okay, well,
I was just going to jump in there, if I may, Councillor Todd, just and express my frustration or amazement that we're talking about uncertainty about the floor area of Hounslow House, given that we've only moved into, that was a newly built building that we only moved into 20 months ago. I think it was April 2019. How there can possibly be any uncertainty about the floor area of that building, which has obviously been built to some plans, utterly astounds me. Also, in terms, we are 80% of the way through the current financial year. Surely it's far more appropriate to be doing this additional work in the in the 2021 statement accounts, not the past statement of accounts. So yeah, I'm sorry, I need to say that there. I'll let you carry on, Councillor Todd.
Okay, of course. Can I put the floor size to one side? I think that's with respect to distraction. If I look at the RICS website, is it fair to say that this property matter is a matter that affects all entities, both private and commercial? And secondly, the key word seems to be uncertainty as to evaluation. Is that a reasonable assessment?
Yes and no. So yes, there is an issue.
Let me pursue that line, and you can tear me apart. The RICS made statements in the middle of last year, and as the year went on, your profession and others met to try and get resolution, and that makes sense. But as I understand it, as of at the moment, there's more reassurance, and I see people like Mr. Gilbert, the head of a huge financial entity, giving reassurance to the market in respect of public companies. Secondly, your colleague sitting beside you, in her letter, I suppose it's her mitigation speech, says that in future she will get a property valuer, which may cost us money. So am I entitled to form a view that you could have done more if, given the complexity and uncertainty, you could have engaged a property expert and came back and renegotiated your audit with a view to getting more certainty?
Not quite. I don't think it's quite that straightforward. So you are absolutely right that RICS, which is the property valuers professional body, issued some guidance early on in the pandemic to identify the potential for a greater degree of uncertainty in valuations. And I think, as Lucy explained, they were drawing attention to the fact that actually it was very difficult to value things as at the 31st of March, simply because we didn't know how the market was going to move. You are, however, required to provide a valuation at 31st of March, and does need to be materially correct. So what we are looking for is some evidence that the way in which your valuer got to the 31st of March position was based on information that would give them a materially correct position. and then we will all recognise that there is a degree of uncertainty attached to that is specific to 2020 in respect of the pandemic and the impacts of COVID on property markets. I think probably the best way to describe it is that if you were trying to sell an asset on the 28th of February, it would have had one value. On the 31st of March, it might have had no value at all because nobody wanted to buy it. And by now, things are picking up and we're starting to see things look a little bit more like normal. So there is something about the time. We do have access to a firm of valuers who can help us with anything that we need valuations on, where they are particularly complex or challenging. That's usually the case with investment properties rather than things like the town hall, or Hazel House, sorry. But the problem with your Hazel House valuation is what we're asking for is the basic information that the valuer has used and which any valuer would need in order to come to a valuation. It's not about the methodology, which is where our own valuer would help and support us to challenge you. It's about how you got there in the first place. So I don't think we're concerned about the method that your valuer has applied. I think we're very comfortable with the way in which the valuer has done things. We're just trying to prove that the information that they've relied on to do that is right.
Okay, I'm nearly coming to the end. You've been very helpful. Can I ask your colleague, when we last met in September, there was a brief dialogue between you and me about property valuations, and that was holding you up then. Are you really standing by the statement that here we are 3 or 4 months later, it's still outstanding?
Yeah, as I think Karen and I have both said, property, plant and equipment, specifically the land and building valuations, are very complex. There's a lot of different valuation methods used because the council has a number of different assets. It is a complex area. It's been made more complex by COVID. We've had to consider the valuation uncertainties and the additional rigours of the FRC requirements. The work has just taken a longer time to get done because we're doing it in a lot more detail, as Karen set out.
Okay, well, I'm coming to the end and you've been very patient. I still can't accept that I have to go back and see the leader of the council, one of my colleagues has, and say we haven't got a clue when we're going to get. Harrow have got a completion document, an audit completion document. Why haven't we got that?
We did give you a draft audit completion report in December, Councillor Todd. It didn't come through committee. It's the same as the document that went to Harrow's audit committee. It's the same.
You're not answering the question with respect. What reassurances to give me and the council?
That the work was substantially complete. It was complete enough to a point that I was comfortable to issue a completion report in draft.
And was that issued before you made the request for ICT and HR data?
Yeah.
So it wasn't complete?
At the time, I believed it to be complete.
Okay. Final question. I'm still totally unaccepted that you can't give us a date, a figure, a guideline. Perhaps we should speak to our valuers. But how do I know you've got enough staff and expertise on this case to bring it to a speedy conclusion?
The audit team is continuing where additional resources are required. I'm bringing them in.
That's a statement of intent for the future. Why haven't you brought them in months ago after we didn't hit the November deadline? I did. Additional resources have been brought in. As I say, the work is very complex, and as you would have seen in the Redmond review, public sector auditors are sometimes in short supply. But where I have been able to bring an additional resource, I have done. I mean, I did follow your guidance and read the Redmond review, and it proposes an October report to full council each year. I think we'd have a regular seat in the council, but you'd put your hand up and explain why you're late again. I mean, you wouldn't be able to meet Redmond, would you?
It's probably worth me just chipping in on that one, just to say.
It's a rather silly question, I understand that.
Well, it's not. It's a fair question, really, because one of the issues that Redmond, the Redmond review was commissioned because last year a significant number of local authorities did not receive their audit opinion by the 31st of July, which was the target date. It wasn't confined to any particular supplier. There are 5 firms that operate in this market, and each of the firms struggled to meet the 31st of July deadline, and you were one of the councils who was caught up in that. MHCLG were concerned about it and commissioned the Redmond report. He's identified a whole number of factors that contribute towards the things that created that problem. I think what none of us anticipated, including Redmond, when he started his report and indeed when he drafted it, was quite the impact that the COVID pandemic was going to have on all of us. So it is fair to say, and absolutely defend Lucy and the team, that things that could have been done in a week had we been on site have actually taken significantly longer when we're working remotely, because it is just much harder to do an audit remotely, as your own team will have found it quite challenging to put the set of accounts together in the first place remotely. MHCLG had recognised that and extended the deadlines to November for this year. They've also recognised that there is a permanent challenge with that July deadline, and the intention is not to return to that, but to stick with September going forwards. And that's intended, I think, to take some of the heat out of the system and give audit firms a better chance of getting a better level of coverage and completion, if you like, by the due date. But there is no doubt that it is a very tight timetable, and will present a challenge for all audit firms in every council.
Okay, can I ask you a final question? You've heard your colleague answer questions as best as she can, or appears to be. How do you still stand by her statement that we can't quantify date? What conditions can we set? What reassurance can we get to the public funds, millions of pounds, and we've got an open-ended? You can't leave this meeting tonight saying that's all you're going to say. Surely there's got to be some undertaking from the firm. I mean, you'd be asking for an additional contract with any other supplier.
It's just not possible to give you a definite date. We cannot sign your audit report until we've got all of the evidence that we need to give us the assurance that we can sign that statement that your accounts are materially correct. It really is. You know, we are working as hard as we can and as quickly as we can. I can tell you any date, but if I haven't on that date, if Lucy hasn't got the information that she needs, she cannot sign the accounts, because that is her professional responsibility to make sure that she's got the evidence.
I really understand. And my final point is, you're not suggesting that we have withheld information or haven't been cooperated with you, are you?
Not at all. No.
Not at all.
No, we have every cooperation from your team.
Okay. And I'm fascinated by the same couch appears behind both of you. So is that double entry or what? I'm not quite sure. Okay. Thank you, Chair. You've been very patient.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Chair, my apologies. I'd gone offline for about 10-15 minutes. My connection had dropped. So whatever in terms of the voting, I will withdraw myself from that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Councillor Mann, that's okay. This item is only for noting. We're just completing we're just finishing up on item 5, as you can tell. Yeah. So yeah, you missed some detailed questioning, very helpful detailed questioning from Councillor Todd. Yeah, in terms of my comments on this, basically, I'm shocked, appalled, and outraged that the accounts have not been signed off yet, and I consider this is severe reputational damage to this council, and yeah, it is quite frankly, it is intolerable. Now, we do know that there has been some impact on the sector. I've got in front of me a press release from the Public Sector Audit Appointments organisation, PSAA, from the 4th of December, and that says that 55% of audit opinions were not issued by the 30th of November deadline. What that means, conversely, is that 45% of them were of the 478 local bodies. And I would imagine that since the 30th of November, a fair number of the remaining 55% have have now been completed. And then I, wearing a different hat, I was I attended a seminar by Queen Mary University London about working during the pandemic, and one of their researchers had looked at how auditors have adapted during the pandemic, and the feedback from a number of interviews and qualitative work was that auditors had adapted extremely well and were highly productive working from home. So I'm having a little bit of difficulty contrasting that. In terms of getting the statement of accounts signed off, what I'd like to propose is that in addition to the communication that you're having with our officers, now that you've had this detailed conversation with members of this committee, is that we institute a weekly email or, if necessary, phone call every Monday, stating what has been achieved over the last 7 days and what will be achieved over the next 7 days. I would propose that we institute that effective from next Monday and continue that until the statement of accounts is signed off. Is that acceptable to you, Lucy and Karen?
Sorry, couldn't find my mute button.
So is that Lucy? Is that acceptable as a crisis management communication process, that you send us a weekly email each Monday, just with a very brief summary of what has been achieved over the last 7 days and what is expected to be achieved over the coming 7 days?
If members would find that useful, I'm happy to do that, yes.
And members, would you find that useful? I would certainly find it useful, and would give.
Yes, Chair, I'd support you on that. Yeah, seeing as that we're in a difficult hole, we need to work our way forward as to getting out of it. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I actually very support that very much, that we regular monitor and actually we know where we are. It's never happened before.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So we can institute that from next Monday. And if you need to speak to us, and if you need any support from us, then then please reach out. We need to get this sorted as rapidly as possible. I think I'd like to leave the matter there, unless any other members have further questions or points they want to make.
No, that's fine.
No. Okay, so that was a update and reports for noting. The next item on the agenda, if we can move on, is item number 6, which will be Mike Pinder on internal audits, etc. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Mike Pinder. I'm Head of Audit and Investigation for the Council. Report is for noting. It begins on a very neat page 100. The usual update against the internal audit plan begins at the table at 5.4 on page 102, which sets out where each of the the stage at which each of the audits are at. As you'll note from paragraph 5.5 at the bottom of 105, 6 reports were finalised in Q2, one of which received limited assurance. And I've provided a summary of that report for you at the top of page 106. Just to emphasise, it's not that the council isn't delivering those houses. It's just that we couldn't get the information to support or otherwise to confirm that. And management are working to agree, have agreed the recommendations, are working to implement that by the 31st of March 2021. We will, of course, update you in subsequent committees as to the progress on that recommendation. Moving down to paragraph 5.7, the key performance indicators on the internal audit service. As you'll see, for Q2, the KPI was 35%. We've actually managed to deliver 50%, so we're actually ahead of target for the quarter. In terms of follow-ups, section 5.10, so a good 80%, 87% of the high recommendations have been completed. As you'll note from the table at 5.11, there are 3 which are outstanding. 2 of those we've been given revised implementation dates, both of which are in the future, so I couldn't give you an update on those. We will follow those up and provide you with an update to the next committee. The other one relating to the business continuity and the IT plans, I mentioned in the status that there is a piece of work scheduled for November, December. I've had verbal confirmation that that has been delivered, and we're going to get a copy of the report from that piece of work. So hopefully that will see that recommendation completed. Do you want, before I go on to horizon scanning and the fraud bit, do you want me to pause for questions, or do you want me to introduce the full?
I think carry on, and then we'll take questions from the whole section.
So section 6, with one eye to planning, there were just a couple of key issues that are happening across the sector that we wanted to just provide a bit of background information to you. You may well be aware of a cyber attack that happened on a London borough, and the financial pressures that have been experienced by the London Borough of Croydon. We are considering those very much and talking to management about those, and considering those as risks to the council per se, and how we will look at that as part of planning. We're not saying either are particularly a risk to the council, we're just exploring those so we can consider those as audit planning, consider if they are a risk, and then look to audit to see whether those are risks. Finally, section 7 looks at the anti-fraud work. The results from the service are included in the table at 7.6. There's a lot of it's difficult in this sector at the moment because of IUCs and being able to knock on people's doors. So we're not able to complete as many investigations as we'd like. But overall, as you'll see, the performance of the team is still at a reasonable standard, and we're still able to report the work of my team and the housing team, and we've still managed to do some fraud work and get some results. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Mike. Questions or comments, Councillor Mann?
Chair, no questions from me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike.
Councillor Purwell?
Thank you. It's a very good report.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Summer?
I think, yes, a good report, but I got a question, if you can clarify that on 104, topic number 20, housing application. I would like to know what how many people allocate the job housing, and do they check the people who allocate them? Are they doing the right thing, or because I got a lot of complaints about that?
Sorry, the number 20 housing applications.
Yeah,
because
when they're allocating to a person, who's checking on them?
So we will be. We're just planning that audit. So I'll be able to update that at a subsequent committee.
No, because what happened, I heard, is a lot of favoritism because of the cost and religion and all that sort of things.
I can't, as I say, we haven't started that audit yet, so I can't comment on that. But I consider your comment. I mean, we would look for transparency and objectivity in the process, and we'll report back and hopefully give you assurance on that.
Thank you very much,
Mike.
Thank you,
Mike. Would it be helpful if Councillor Simra could send you maybe a couple of examples from his caseworker experience of things he's concerned about? Would a couple of examples be helpful for helping you shape the work? I know you're at terms of reference stage.
Yeah, if there are examples, we're obviously happy to consider those. I mean, we would be looking at the processes and trying to confirm that across the board. But if we've got examples, we can obviously consider those as part of our sampling, just to see if there was anything untowards.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. Councillor Todd.
I have a few questions, please, Mike. If you're copying our page 102.
Yep.
Tell me when you're ready. Yeah.
Yep.
Have you missed the boat a bit with Fusion number 3?
So, yeah, that one's been an interesting one this year.
Okay.
We discussed, obviously couldn't undertake it at the time. We leave it on the plan so we can update you. There will be some work in that area, but it won't be Fusion.
You're like the auditor, you have a wonderful smile. Can I go on to page 103, please?
Yep.
Number 7, I haven't got a clue what deputyships are. Enlighten me.
Okay, so this is where clients don't have anybody who can look after their money, so we basically take responsibility for their bank accounts and charges.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's very clear. Number 11, I'm nearly finished, Chair. Children's Services. I declare an interest. I suppose I'm on the Children in Care Committee. By reading the risk management of earlier papers, Ofsted wrote quite a critical letter to the council in January this year, saying the Children's Services, which got a good mark earlier, a couple of years ago, they raised some issues. Mike, I don't know whether you're about to start that one. I've written today to Tom Bruce asking him to explain. Were you aware of that or not?
I was aware of something, and we're currently scoping that audit, so I'll make sure the auditor's aware, and we'll consider that.
It may be a duplication, but I thought you should know.
Yeah, thank you.
And can I finally come on to your? I do find your reports very helpful. They're very informative. The top of page 106. Affordable housing.
Yeah.
You clearly have the benefit of a better education than mine. That some of the words sound so eloquent, but they tell me nothing. The key word to me is that assurance level limited. What do you mean by limited?
So we have 4 levels of assurance.
I understand that, but this is quite a poor one, isn't it? Can I read you on that?
So it would be an amber red, not a red.
Okay.
But yeah, it's towards the to that. I think so whilst we were getting management assurances on the figures, we couldn't see the profiling of the number, so we couldn't give assurance. So it's about having the controls and mechanisms in place rather than saying it's categorically failing or bad. We just couldn't give the assurance that the progress was happening.
I find that fairly ambiguous. Speak to me as if I've never heard of it before. I go to the Affordable Housing Committee.
Okay.
By way of example, they've just spent 81 million quid, or about to, buying some flats that haven't got planning permission, and some Barratt homes. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but in the report, Mike, there's no mention of a valuation report. you know, sort of things that I would expect to get. But their argument may be, well, we've just done it, we're just signing a deal off. And so I'm concerned as a layman that the meat in the sandwich is missing. I mean, it's a great achievement if you can buy flats cheaply, whatever. But that's not the point you're making in this, really, is it? Are you simply looking at key performance indicators here, or what?
So it was a project based audit. So we were looking at their project management and how they're sort of monitoring. So yeah, a lot of how they're delivering the KPIs, and whether we could see that they're meeting the targets that they've set for themselves.
So pushing you a bit on that. So if you've got 4 years, what are you saying? After 2, you should be up to 2,500 houses, that sort of thing.
Profiling is basically.
I love that smile, Michael. Yeah.
Yeah. So profiling is about saying how many did they think they would have delivered at this point. So rather than just accrue, like, were they expecting to deliver 2,500? We're saying to them, did you expect to have delivered 1,500 by now or 2,000 by now? So we were looking for a profile of how many they were going to deliver at each stage, and then we were looking for the performance against that to be able to say that. Okay. I mean, they're very clear that they feel that they are ultimately going to exceed the 5,000. We just couldn't give the assurance that was going to happen because we just didn't have the information on that report.
Your review, if they do go on a buying spree, what they buy it for and how they negotiate is not a matter for you.
We consider all risks. This one was this audit was based upon the project management of that and the delivery of that of oversight. If subsequently there's a lot of spend in this area, then we might consider it as part of a future plan and looking at the risks and how we manage that perspective.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Chair. Very helpful.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Just following on that point, I'd cross-reference that piece about the 5,000 affordable homes with the similar item that appears on our corporate risk register. So I believe that we will get the corporate risk register back at the next meeting. So I think it will be it'll be very. I think the committee will be very interested in that phasing, in particular, whether it is about delivering or securing, because delivering is a home that somebody can live in. Securing is a contractual thing for something which might not be built or able to be lived in until some time in the future, such as 2026, 2028 even, for one of the sites that the Affordable Housing Committee was discussing recently. So how that fits with the 5,000 target, I'm not quite sure. So yes, I would like to maybe have some more detail on that as a matter arising at the next meeting. This report is for noting. I think that's right. Yeah, I think it's for noting.
It's noting, yes.
And yeah, again, I echo my colleagues' positive comments about this being a very useful and informative report. So as always, thank you. And I think we've noted that, and that then moves us to the end of the agenda. And as far as I'm aware, there is no matters.
Chair, can I interrupt you?
Yes.
With your permission, yeah. I think our dialogue with the auditors was critical and very important. And what I personally miss is an input from the director, Clive Palfreyman. I wonder if you'd be so gracious to get a response from him. Could we hear from him now if possible? I know he's out of sequence, but he does have enormous experience and is an accountant himself. And I think we may have missed. I want to make sure that I readily agree with your conditioning, but I thought Clive may have a more wider perspective. Or would you mind?
I think, and yeah, that's a good point, Councillor Todd, and I very welcome some input from Clive, including the including his perspective of the impact of the delays on his team and the council more generally. So go ahead, please, Clive.
Can do. What can I say? You know, Lucy and Karen, I imagine they're still on the call somewhere. Their input this evening is quite helpful. I think we all collectively share a view in terms of bringing the audit to the close. From my perspective, I am genuinely concerned when I hear the words shocked, outrageous. I can't remember the words you used, Councillor Reeson, in the same sentence as accounts production, because whilst I do believe Rupert and the team have done as much as they possibly can in terms of providing the information across to audit colleagues, it reflects badly on us all. I'm uncomfortable that I can't give you the assurance on the accounts that I need to. I'm concerned I can't give the assurance to the wider community that I would like to at the current time, in a year when clearly we've been busy with other matters, and you know, here we are in the middle of January dealing with the pandemic, preparing the budget when I've got resource tied up dealing with sort of accounts type activity. I guess, you know, I know Lucy's absolutely spot on that she's doing as much as she possibly can within Mazars to bring the audit to a conclusion. Obviously, I've offered as much support as we can possibly provide to bring that to a conclusion as quickly as possible. For me, last year's gone. Now, you know, a good planning process for next year's audit, and sort of would leave us in a position whereby hopefully, you know, we are able to meet the September deadlines. But I guess in public session, I am keen to stress, members, that you know, the delays we've experienced this year and last year should in no way detract negatively from the work Rupert, Rod Wigbout, Lorelei and the Treasury team and the pension fund team do in terms of preparing the accounts. So frustrated, yes, and I'd be lying if I said anything else. But hopefully now in the final throes of this year, and you know, you have my assurance that we're working closely with Karen and Lucy to make sure next year's better.
Yeah, thank you, Clive. That's very, very helpful. And certainly, if I just reiterate what I was saying, I've got confidence in. I'm impressed by the professionalism and the confidence of the team with the producing the accounts and things. It's the external environment that is the cause of certainly my concerns. And I also would just highlight that all of this is about non-cash balance sheet values in terms of properties. I think our residents have no reason to be concerned about other than the reputational point. Okay, I think this brings us to the end of the meeting. I'd like to thank all the members for all the members and officers for their participation and time and contributions this evening, and thank our ICT officers who've been producing the meeting, democratic services officers who are supporting, and thank everyone and anyone who's watching from the public. So I'd like
sorry, Chair, just before you close, can I also thank you for taking on the chair at a drop of a hat, and actually you've done a very, very good job. You know, the actual diligence shown is exceptional. You'd make a fine chair Yeah, so there are things to look forward to in the future, and I think that, you know, because you were given it at the very last moment, you've made absolute brilliant job of it. So can I thank you? Thank you.
Yes,
thank you, Councillor.
This is what I was going to say. Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't really, because it's the IT system has actually failed me, and Richard's done a great job.
Thank you, Councillor Purwell. It's my pleasure.
Come on, Councillor Todd, admit it.
Okay, itchy head. I thought I did very well too. Anyway, good night. Yeah.
Good night, gents.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Good
you.
night, all.
We'll close the meeting
Good night.
now. Thank you.
Okay, closing live meeting.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Let's sign off.